I fired one shot. I attempted to fire a second shot, but the gun jammed. So we took off running. Like, I'm not about to stand there in a gunfight with a jammed gun. So we take off. It wasn't until about an hour later that I realized that one shot had hit a young man dead in his heart. And I'm sitting there like, there's no possible way. And I often tell people, well, you know, the few people that I've shared this story with, like, it was almost like I was a marksman. Like, if I had a target and was at the gun range trying to hit the target, man, like, I would have to question it, how many shots it would take me to be able to hit anywhere close to the bullseye. But in this instant, that one shot hit him dead in the middle of his heart.
Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to Walk the Way, Talk the Way. I'm your host, Brent Davidson. And I just want to thank you guys, first of all, for watching all of the last few podcasts that we've did, and for all of you guys that have been supporting us. I've got a guest with me today who is coming all the way from a different time zone. He's got a very, very powerful testimony. He was in prison for 26 years, and now that he's out, he's actually working with some of those individuals that are still incarcerated, with the incarcerated population, with families of people that are incarcerated, and actually with guys that are incarcerated. And he's doing a lot of different things. He's the executive director of Iron Sharpens Iron, which is what I was just trying to describe to you guys in the best way that I could. But I just want to jump right into it, and I want to welcome Jamarcus Fields to the show today. So welcome, Jamarcus.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So a lot of people probably don't know, but I'm on a group chat with Jermaine Brown, who was on this show a few weeks back. And Jamarcus is on that group chat as well. And so I've kind of got a chance to know Jamarcus a little bit and watch his testimony and everything. And I just knew that we had to have you on here, man, from the podcast that I've watched and everything you've been involved involved in. And so let's just start at the beginning. Where were you born and raised, Jamarcus?
So I was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in 1975, where I lived up until the age of 18. So I often say I was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and was raised in the DOC. Because I went at such a young age. And to date, I've done more of my life in prison than I have in society. So I was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I was raised in the Indiana Department of Corrections.
So what was your childhood kind of like, Jamarcus?
You know, I often say I had a wonderful childhood. Despite how life turned out for me, I cannot blame any of it on my upbringing. I came up in magnet schools. I was a nerd for all practical purposes. I had both parents in the home. If we were poor, I never knew it. That kind of upbringing. I just got to a point in my life where the lights in the streets was just a little too bright for me. And I was just attracted to it. That was not my upbringing at all. I was raised in education. I was raised playing sports. I was raised in church. Like, my mom took me to church like 3-4 times a week. But at some point, those lights in the streets and the glitz and the glamour just caught my attention, and I just kind of locked in like a pit bull. It was crazy.
I learned a lot about you, like I said, and one thing I found interesting is that, can you talk about the fact that you went to like a private school for a while? Because of your intellect?
Yeah. So as far as I can remember, I was in magnet schools. I was in an accelerated program, like almost from the time I hit the classroom. Um, and I remember in the early years, a lot of people would have categorized me as a class clown. That's kind of the name that we give the students who are always disrupting the lesson. Um, but it wasn't disciplinary for me, and I wasn't seeking attention. I was bored. Um, that's when they finally decided to test me and seeing that my scores were accelerated and I needed to be in a magnet program. So I was put in a magnet program, and that kind of changed my route when it came to education because I needed to be in an environment where I was challenged. And then once I was able to get that kind of a setting, I was good. Up until I started excelling in sports. And I remember, uh, I had become a basketball star. I'm in middle school at this time. And anytime I would go to the park and play, a lot of the guys would always talk about, now I'm playing the real players. Because, in magnet schools, you're playing against other brainiacs.
Right.
So I remember begging my mom to let me go to public school so I could compete against the best athletes in the city. Like I was shooting for the top. I wanted to be the best in the city, so I needed to play against the best. And after much conversation, much debate, my mom finally gave in and decided to let me go. And that's when my attention started to wane. Other things started to become attractive to me. My studies started to slack off a little bit. And I just kind of got on a slippery slope and just kept sliding further and further into the streets.
That's interesting. And I'm glad you brought all that up because I always tell when I talk about my testimony, sports were my whole life growing up. Like I'm a little bit of the same, but a little opposite. I wasn't raised in church. I was just raised on sports, man. Um, I had one older brother who's passed away unfortunately now, and all our whole lives was about sports. And so I'm the same way. Kind of, I was really really good at basketball, and I was really good at baseball, and I. Had I not started getting in trouble, I'm kind of like you. I uh, possibly should have played some pro ball, baseball anyway, but I did. I played baseball all 4 years in college, and
Okay.
so yeah, and so like I was a really good athlete too, and I know exactly what you mean. So I wondered what happened in your life that made you go from public school to private school, and that makes perfect sense because yeah, I mean all the best athletes are usually in the public schools, and so I heard you talk a lot about football. What was your main sport? Was it football or basketball or kind of both?
I loved basketball personally, but I was great at football. So football became my primary sport. Like if there was a sport I would have tried to take all the way, it would have been football.
Okay. And so how far did you end up playing sports in school?
Just through high school. I didn't even make it through high school before I was going to prison.
Wow. Okay. And so during this time you were going to school in Fort Wayne then this whole
Correct.
time? And so um one thing I found interesting was how it sounded like, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong, like you were on like this path of excellence, and it almost sounded like you went on this trip to Chicago and like that kind of like changed your trajectory in a way. Um, is that true, or was some other stuff going on along the way?
I mean, the streets had already caught my attention in Fort Wayne before I went to Chicago. But that trip took it from a 2 to a 30. Um, and I often say, like, my parents, when it came, to young parents raising young children, my parents were looking for moments to woosah. Me and my brother are only 2 years apart. So like once they started raising kids, they were raising kids for the next 18, 20 years. And so it got to a point where during the summertime, we would go and stay with my aunt in Chicago for the summer while we were out for summer break. So it was, me, my brother, a handful of my other cousins. So like everybody followed suit. Like, hey, she said she'll keep the kids for the summer so we all can get a break. So they would send all of us to Chicago for the summer. And then we would come back like 2 weeks before school started. And the first time they sent me up there, it was different. Like being on the streets of Fort Wayne and then walking the streets of Chicago was like totally, it was like night and day. So a lot of my cousins were fearful of that. They didn't really like to go outside because the area in Chicago where we lived in was gang territory. So it was a lot of gang violence going on, a lot of fights, a lot of shootings. And for some odd reason, that excited me. So while the rest of my cousins wanted to stay in the house, like I wanted to go outside where that action was. And this went on, that the first summer that happened. And then I went back to Fort Wayne and I couldn't wait to get back. So the next summer when it was time to go, like my bags was packed before the school year was over. I already knew what was coming. So I was ready to go. It wasn't until that third summer that my mom kind of noticed the change. I think she realized like, he leaves, we take him up there one way, but he always comes back different. So it stopped after that, but the damage was already done. Like I was so deep into the streets at that point that it was almost like a point of no return.
Okay. And so what side of Chicago were you on? Because I asked because Pastor Brown and I have done a lot of witnessing in Chicago. We went on a evangelism and we were in Inglewood on the south side. And if I just say a funny story, I just gotten saved and Pastor Brown was taking me on these trips to Indy and to Chicago. And my dad was so worried about it, man. He was like, you're going to be the only white person in that whole area if you go to the south side of Chicago.
Right.
So what areas were you kind of in Chicago?
I was on the south side, off of Garfield by 79.
Okay. So when you came back to Fort Wayne and everything, were you affiliated with were you already affiliated with the gang at that time? How did all that kind of play out? Like how did you become affiliated with the gang life and everything?
So I, just being out on the streets, the neighborhood that I grew up in, was heavy with gangs. So I grew up connected to a specific gang. That was kind of what, the term we used to use back then. That was what ran through my blood, because almost everybody in my neighborhood was affiliated with that organization. So at some point I picked up the torch and ran with it.
Okay. And so can you talk about like all the events that led up to you going to prison for the big sentence? Like, I guess what I'm asking is like, what did you do to end up in like juvenile detention and all that like the escalation to the big prison sentence?
Well, honestly, there was no escalation.
Okay.
I didn't have a lengthy criminal history as a juvenile. Like even when, and that's not to say that I didn't go to juvenile, but like my first 2 times going to juvenile was my mom calling me in as a runaway.
Oh, wow.
Not anything criminal. Like, my mom realized she was losing a battle to the streets. So she was trying everything in her power to try to save her son from being swallowed by the streets. So when I would leave home and, I'm out running the streets and chasing girls, chasing money, gang banging, mom was at home worried. So she would call me in as a runaway. Like I would rather the police get him and I know he's at juvenile center than to get a call in the middle of the night that somebody done killed him because he was out there playing a game that he didn't have no business playing. As a child, of course, I hated it to find out that, my own mom, had introduced me to the criminal justice system. But as I grew up and matured and, kind of wired my cognitive thinking, I understood it. Um, and I wholeheartedly believe those actions and the prayers of my mom, my grandmother, the community, everybody that knew the value that I had within me, came in handy. Like they was praying for me when I didn't even care about myself. So that was big in hindsight, but as a kid, I didn't like it. So it drew a wedge between me and my mom because, I'm in the streets now. So, we live by the code. You don't mess with the police. So, like my own mama calling the police on me, like, you the enemy too. So after I found that out, I moved out at the age of 17, like right before my 18th birthday. I moved out of my parents' house thinking I was grown. And less than 4 months later, I was going to prison with a 60-year sentence. The very thing my mom tried to prevent from happening, which was the street swallowing me, I ended up getting swallowed and sent to the DOC anyway in less than 4 months.
Okay. Jamarcus, I know you had a lot of trauma in your life, man. I mean, just a tremendous amount of trauma, to be honest, just from the hour-long testimony I watched of you. But one of the big ones that I heard you guys talk about a lot was your younger brother getting shot. Can you talk about that at all? If you feel comfortable talking about that, how that happened, what was all that about?
Yeah, and that's crazy. That was one of those times when I was in juvenile. So as a juvenile, I went to the juvenile center twice. And my second time in the juvenile center, I had been in there. It wasn't even 30 days. They had set my court date back like 30 days. So I was probably in there maybe 20 days at this point. And I had moved all the way up to the honor dorm. So I'm in the honor dorm and it's the middle of the night. We're asleep. And an officer comes and wakes me up and tells me that I have a visit. For the sake of this conversation, I'm going to say like 2 o'clock in the morning. There are no visits at 2 a.m. So I'm like, I don't know where they getting ready to take me. I start waking everybody up. Like, hey, they telling me I got a visit. If I ain't back in 20 minutes, like, tear this thing up. I don't know what's going on. So when they take me out, I see my mom in one of these rooms and I could tell she had been crying. So I knew something bad had happened. And my mom was actually supposed to be in Detroit. She wasn't even supposed to be in Fort Wayne. So like I knew something was wrong. Either she canceled the trip or she came back. So I get in, and they let her come in to tell me that my brother had gotten shot the night before. So, just being in the streets, I had become numb to people being shot. Like, it happens almost every day. So my only question was, where did he get shot at? Was it an arm? Was it the leg? And mom is just being mom and she's overreacting. And she told me he got shot in the head. So I was like, ooh, with what? And she said a 45. I just knew it was over. So I spazzed out. I started tearing stuff up and officers came in, subdued me, took me to segregation, didn't even get to tell my mom bye. And I sat in there and just cried and I just sat on the floor and cried. And then about 5 o'clock in the morning, they came to get a couple guys that had to go to court that day to get them dressed out and get ready for court. So I looked around the cell. I just got in there again about 2 something in the morning. I don't have none of my property. So I look around. I see a piece of pencil lead on the ground, and then there's some toilet paper in there. I wrote a note on toilet paper.
Oh, wow.
And slid it under the door and asked one of those guys, didn't even know who he was. Asked one of these guys, when you go to court, can you please make sure the judge gets this? I said, whatever it is that you have to do, I am begging you, please make sure the judge gets this. And I, at that point, I was no longer in control. I sat back. They came that afternoon and told me I had a court hearing. Not only did the guy take the note, he actually got it to the judge, and the judge called me into court that afternoon. And after I expressed to him what was going on, just kind of my story, told him who I was, what was going on in my life, he let me go. Like, I got released that same day, walked up to the hospital. My brother was sitting there in the hospital. When I finally found my mom, she took me to his room in ICU. And when I walked in, his head was big as a beach ball. Just the shock and everything from the gun blast. And my brother started violently shaking in his bed. So the nurses rushed in. They made us leave. And once they calmed him down, they told us we could come back. They got his levels manageable. And as soon as I walked in that door again, he started doing the same thing. They came and told me, okay, y'all gonna have to leave. He feels your presence in the room. Like, this only happens when you walk in the room. So they told us we had to leave. So I left, went home. I hadn't been home again in about 20 some days. So I went home, tried to get myself together, and then I just set out on a mission to try to find this guy that I heard was responsible for shooting my brother. So I went on the streets and I tried to hunt him down. I tried to bring him out of hiding. I would beat up family members. This a bunch of dumb stuff. But I was trying to bring him out of hiding so we could deal with this issue that was eating me up. And it's crazy when I look at that whole story, because I was so angry when it happened, and I never had the opportunity to catch up with that guy when I wanted to. And I say that guy as if he was a stranger and I didn't know him. That is definitely not the case. We were all friends. We grew up together, went to school together. We hung out after school on the weekends. Like, we were friends. So I didn't know what happened. I just know that at that point in my life, I lacked emotional intelligence, and I thought revenge was the best route, regardless of what happened. Somebody else needed to feel the same pain that I felt. I say the irony in that for two reasons. One, the doctor told us that if my brother happened to survive, that he would be a vegetable because there was too much brain damage. The bullet ricocheted off a gristle or cartilage right behind his nose, and it shot up right through the middle of his brain. And we used to be able to feel the bullet in the crown of his head, because it never exited. So you could rub on the crown of his head and you could feel the bullet sitting there. And so he said, if by some chance he does make it, he would be a vegetable because there would be too much brain damage. My mom never accepted that. Never. Her faith was so strong that when the doctor said that, he might as well have been speaking Swahili. She went back, and I'm young watching this. This happened in 1992. And I'm a teenager watching this walk of faith that my mom had, and didn't know where it came from. Even though we went to church all the time, this was a different level of spirituality that my mom was walking during this period that I had never saw before. We talking the type of blind faith that she went home and took a cassette recorder, a Walkman, and recorded herself reading the Bible. And she would put these headphones on my brother's head. And while he was in this coma for 8 months, all he would hear is the Bible being read to him in my mom's voice. Wow. And one day we were sitting in the hospital room, and my brother just woke up and started talking like nothing had happened. His first word out of his coma after 8 months was, "Mama, why you not in Detroit?" That's where she was the night he got shot. So he thought it was still October 8th, 1992. Never mind the fact that it's now like July of 93.
Oh man.
And so we all looked around and he started coughing because his throat was dry. He hadn't coughed in 8 months. He had a trach running through his throat. So he started coughing. We got up. I got him a sip of water. My mom went to get the doctor. They came back, took him out, took him to do a CAT scan. The doctor came back crying like a little baby because he could not find the words to explain to us what had just happened. After doing that CAT scan, there were no signs of that bullet or the fragments that were left throughout his brain.
Wow.
My brother was the last patient that doctor worked on. He left the medical field after that. When you experience something that you cannot explain, that messes some people up. And I don't know where he was in his faith walk at that time, but like that miracle performed by God that day did something to him. And when I say did something to him, because my mom ran into him almost 30 years later in Dallas, Texas at the Potter's house. He goes to P.D. Jake's church now. And that's odd that she just ran into him down there 30 years later. And he remembered my brother and called him by the name that he was registered in the hospital under. He wasn't under his government name because they didn't know what the shooting was about, so they put him under an alias name. And the doctor still remembered that name.
Wow. That's wild. God is so good, man. That's an amazing story. And so, Jamarcus, I guess as much as you're comfortable with talking about, I don't know the timeline. I'm guessing it was sometime after that. What happened that led you to your big prison sentence? What happened during that time?
And you know, I lived a life of running the streets all evening, all night. And then I would come in about 5 a.m. I would take a bath, get dressed, and go to school. Even though I had dove into those streets, one thing I did not play with was my education. I would stay out in the streets till 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would still be at school when school started every single day.
Wow.
And one of those nights of just hanging out, decided me and a couple of the guy that I lived with and his cousin decided to go. We went to a wedding reception, and we were the youngest people at the wedding reception, so it was kind of boring to us. So we all decided, hey, let's go to that new club they got downtown. So we decided to go to the club. And so I called this female friend of mine and told her about our plan to go to the club. And she was like, oh, yeah, we want to go too. Where y'all at? I'll come pick y'all. So she came and picked us up. On our way to the club, we pull up at this intersection. The light's red. We just stopped in traffic. And then next thing I know, my partner that I live with is yelling out the window to some guys that were walking down the street. Now, I haven't paid these guys any attention at all. Like, I didn't know them. Like, they were just guys walking down the street to me. Apparently, he knew them. They started having words. They jumped out the car, started arguing, wanting to fight with him. So the female who's driving asked me, hey, what am I doing? Like, the light is green. Cars behind her are starting to honk their horn. So I said, take off, leave them. So we left, went and picked up a couple of her friends, stopped at the gas station, and then I thought we were just going to go to the club. Like, I was cool just going to the club with the ladies. Like, y'all jumped out the car. That's all y'all. I didn't think twice about them. When she came back to the car, she was like, so what we doing about your guy now? You want to go back and get him? I said, I guess we do got to go that way. I said, we could swing through there and pick them up. So I was expecting to go back to our house because we're so close to the house. In my mind, there's no way they're still out there arguing with these dudes. Like they done wouldn't figured out they rag on, they done walked to the house. So on the way to the house, we look and see them a block over, standing at the corner, still arguing. Like, what part of the game is that? So we turn and go down there. Now I'm frustrated because I'm ready to go. This just seems pointless to me. But, you know, they steady arguing. He was like, oh, no, like we gonna fight today. So I get out the car like, okay, let's go fight. In the process of, me getting out the car and arguing, guns get brandished. I had a pistol in my coat that I had just took off thinking I was finna fight. I went back to the car and got it. And upon me getting it, and this was the kind of mentality and demeanor that I had when I was in the streets, and it was a mentality that I took into the streets with me because I have no gray area. It's like all or nothing with me. Either I'm 100% invested or I don't want nothing to do with it at all. So when I set my mind on go, I just go. So once I grabbed the pistol and, kind of got coverage for myself in case they started shooting back, I started firing the gun. And I say started firing because I only fired one shot. So I'm across the street. I fire a shot and I'm giving the details like this the way that I give it to also show you as I build up to how I was able to survive prison mentally the way that I did. I fired one shot. I attempted to fire a second shot, but the gun jammed. So we took off running. Like I'm not about to stand there in a gunfight with a jammed gun. So we take off. It wasn't until about an hour later that I realized that one shot had hit a young man dead in his heart. And I'm sitting there like, there's no possible way. And I often tell people, well, the few people that I've shared this story with, like, it was almost like I was a marksman. Like if I had a target and was at the gun range trying to hit the target, man, like I would have to question how many shots it would take me to be able to hit anywhere close to the bullet. But in this instant, that one shot hit him dead in the middle of his heart. And I remember when I sat in prison in my early years, and I was like, what has happened and what is going on? Like I had to have these conversations with myself. How did I get this far off course? Like my life was panned out. I had a red carpet rolled out in front of me. Like I'm talking to you today, 30-something years since I've been to prison, and I still got a football record at my high school that hasn't been broken since then.
Oh, wow.
Like my path was laid out. I grew up wanting to be a computer programmer. I remember I was one of the only kids in the neighborhood that had a computer. I was already working on writing codes, and how did I end up here? And how is it that my one shot netted me 60 years in prison? I don't know what God doing. I don't know what he trying to show me. But I think I might better pay attention. And life started to change.
Go ahead,
for me.
I'm sorry.
No, and life started to change for me at that point because now, this is like a riddle to me that I'm trying to figure out. Like, what is God doing? And how and why did I end up here? And when I listen to a lot of people's stories of what prison was like for them, my experience was totally different. like outside of missing and not being able to be around my family, prison wasn't hard. Just just being honest. And I took accountability early on. So I already started focusing on the end game. Even though I got a 60-year sentence and they told me I got to do 30, I've already calculated that I can get 4 years worth of time cut. The overachiever in me is going to get every bit of that 4 years. Like whatever I got to take to accomplish that, I'm going to get everything that I can get. I'm not leaving no crumbs on the table. So now I'm already processing. I have 26 years to do in the Department of Corrections. It scared me a little bit because I got arrested at 18. I don't even know what 26 years looks like yet. So I don't know what's going to be waiting on me at the end of this 26 years. So the way I started doing my time was with the mentality that I had to prepare myself as if all I had to depend on at the end of those 26 years was me. Because I don't know if my grandparents still going to be there. I don't know if my parents still going to be there. I don't have any kids. I don't, like the judge broke up all my relationships. So what will I have at the end? If all I have left at the end is me, I want to be able to stand on my feet and say that I made it. And that's how I did my time. But that was because I took accountability. I knew what I did. I didn't go blaming other people. It's your fault, or it's on you because you told on me, or had he not pulled out a gun, I wouldn't have never pulled mine out. At the end of the day, none of that mattered because nobody made me pull that trigger. That was a decision that I made, and these were consequences that I had to live with. And so I just set out on a mission to better myself, to make sure that the best possible version that could be at that finish line met me when I got.
So, as I was listening to your interview, Jamarcus, with your mom, I kind of pre-thought a couple things because in my mind I thought you went to county jail in Marion County, but you went to county jail in Fort Wayne, right?
Correct.
What county was that in? The jail that you went in there?
Allen County Jail. They call it ACJC.
Okay, because Jermaine mentioned a similar story about being in Marion County Jail, but you said that you fought the whole 2 years that you were in the county jail, and so both of your guys' experiences are way different than that Vanderburgh County Jail that I've been at countless times and been in population and all of that. And I mean, Evansville is the third largest city in Indiana. It's right. Fort Wayne, I believe, is the second.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's amazing to me that there's that big of a difference in Vanderburgh County Jail and in Allen County that you had to fight all 2 years that you were there. Or I don't know if you had to. I mean, what was that what was that like?
So, my case was, it was deemed a gang-related crime. So, all of my gang history, the young man who passed away, whatever he was affiliated with, the narrative turned into a gang-related killing. Although it was anything but how do you argue and explain that? So now I'm in the county jail where it's a lot of gang members, and no pistols. So it was time to knuckle up, and I'm talking about, and I had to fight like the whole time. Like there was always people trying to get at me. Um, and then when it wasn't even personally about me, just regular gang fights that just happened. The jail tried to separate and keep separation between the gangs, but it didn't work all the time. So yeah, fault. But I tell you, I fought and I didn't mind fighting. So like it didn't bother me at all. Like even I went to day 2 of my trial, from SEG for a fight when I made it back from the first day of trial. I went to trial all day, got back to the unit. We got into a big gang fight. I went to SEG and then had to go to trial from SEG. So like it never stopped. That process just kept going and going and going. But
So,
let me also add that during this time, the state of Indiana had declared a war on drugs and a war on gangs. So during these 90s, while I was in there, like I was in the county jail 93 and 94, in the heart of the war on gangs and war on drugs, the jail was packed with gang members and drug dealers. And while Fort Wayne is the second biggest city, Fort Wayne ain't that big.
yeah.
Like it's not that big. And then when you look at subsections of the city, the inner city is where all of the blacks were. So this gang is fighting that gang, and there's only 4 neighborhood blocks that separate them. Because we're all condensed into this small area. And so now you got a lot of issues that took place on the streets, and now we all sitting up in jail because of this war on gangs. So like the jail may not be as bad now as it was then, but then it was a pot that was stewing gang members, and everybody was fighting to get out that hot water.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so you actually went to trial then on this case, on the case that you were just, and then so as they convicted you and you got 60 years and do 30 basically. Is that how it went?
Correct.
Okay. Can you talk about a little bit about your I know you talked already about prison, but which prison did you land in first?
I went to ISP, Indiana State Prison in Michigan City, Indiana. I walked through those doors Valentine's Day of 94. And I stayed there for 13 years.
Oh wow.
And I left there in 2007 after leveling down to and went to the Correctional Industrial Facility in Pendleton, Indiana, in 07. And then I left there in 2015 and got sent to Miami Correctional Facility. I stayed in Miami Correctional Facility. I got there and then I leveled down and went to the level 1, then transferred to South Bend Community Reentry Center, which is the DOC Work Release Center, in 2018. And then I got released in 2019.
I heard you talk about one story, and if you're comfortable talking about this subject, you had mentioned, I thought I heard you mention that you were, maybe not, but you were affiliated with the GDs in prison. Is that was okay? And so you were affiliated with them a little bit in prison, and then Can you talk about what that was like and how? Can you just tell the story that you told that I heard that I think? Do you know what I'm talking about? That story about um, you said that you were locking down the cell. You were what kind of like you were watching over the cell at one point for the GDs, and it was like God kind of spoke to you about the fact that you were doing all this on the street, and now you're sitting here and you're doing the same thing in prison.
Okay, no, I was in lockup when that happened. So we had just had a whole uh gang thing, and this wasn't an issue with the rival gang. This was within our own organization. We had an individual that we ended up having to um put our hands on it. And as a result of that, we kind of went overboard. But there was this big mentality of loyalty within the organization, and when you didn't, you got dealt with accordingly. So in hindsight, we went overboard, but in the midst of the mission, like, you knew this was coming, and we did what we thought we were supposed to do. But I ended up in SEG as a result of that, me and three other individuals. But while I was in SEG, man, I sat there, man, and I've had two moments like this while I was incarcerated, man, where like God spoke to me so clearly and so plainly. And the level of conviction that I felt was like overwhelming, because I was hit with the reality that here I am. At this point, I was 21 years old. Now, remember, I just caught my case when I was 18. So this is how early, no, I'm sorry, I was 22 years old. So I'm 4 years into this whole prison thing. And I'm sitting in a prison inside of a prison for the same activity that led me to prison.
Hmm.
Something's wrong with that. I'm not the smartest apple on the tree, but I'm pretty close. And I had enough sense to know something was right, that here I went from this promising life, promising career, to I am now in a prison inside of a prison for the same thing that led me to prison. I said, nah, man, something got to change. I can't keep doing this because I don't like these results that I'm getting, and I'm getting them over and over and over again. And I'm like, at what point can you dig lower? To me, it was like, when you can't dig no lower, there's no point for you on this earth. So I'm like, I can't dig any lower than a prison inside of a prison. Like, where do you go next to get lower? Do you end up on death row? Do you then end up dead? Like, how do you get lower? And I'm like, I don't want to find out what lower looks like than this, because this is stupid. And I know better. So when I came off segregation, I was done. I was done. I turned my flag in. I'm done with this gang stuff. It's time to get my life back in order. It's time to take control. Somewhere along the line, I got addicted to people. I cared more about what other people thought than I cared about the consequences of what I was doing.
Mm.
And that's a terrible combination.
And
Because
so,
when I look at these situations, these aren't Marcus situations. Like, I went to prison for some beef that had nothing to do with me. I didn't get out that car. I didn't know that dude. Like, that had absolutely nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up in prison with 60 years. Putting our hands on this guy that led me to segregation. That wasn't a Marcus situation. I didn't have nothing personal against this dude. But yet here I am sitting in a prison inside of the prison for proving stuff to other people. And my mom always told me I was loyal to a fault because I would always set me on the shelf and take care of everybody else. And the irony in that is I'm still loyal to a fault. I'm just not doing it in a negative manner anymore. So I often talk about transferable skills. Those are one of those transferable skills that I've brought over into mentoring and my executive director role with Iron Sharpens Iron. Like, this isn't promo, media, photo ops. Like, this is real life, man. And I really care about what people going through and what they dealing with. And not having to deal with it in silence by this. My biggest was while I was at Miami Correctional Facility. There was something spiritually amazing taking place in that facility while I was there. And I was mad when I got there. But again, we don't understand. God always knows best. God placed me exactly where I needed to be. And I'm married. I've been married for 5 years. It'll be 6 in October. And I met my wife while I was in prison. So I was the clerk in the education department at CIF in Pendleton. And my wife got hired in as a teacher there. And that's how I met her. So you know how it is when a male and a female are around each other and feelings have gotten involved. It's kind of hard to hide it. What you think are subtle looks are telltale signs. So eventually word got to the administration that, something was going on between us. And they basically kicked me out, transferred me to another facility. And it's crazy because this all happened in a period where I had left the old me behind and walked into the new me. But you don't get to choose where and when you fall in love. So it would seem to the individuals on the outside looking in that, I'm still playing a penitentiary game. I done con this woman and, you know what I mean? Like, I know how it looks, but I'm like, man, if they like really only knew the work that God was doing in me and the fact that just not maybe a month prior, I had woke up with this overwhelming feeling that I was just tired. I had a bunch of drugs in my cell. I had a cell phone in my cell. Like, penitentiary hustling, I was living my best life. And then I just woke up in the middle of the night one night and was like, man, what am I doing? First it was the gangs. I left the gangs alone. Like, now I'm back hustling. And I'm like, I'm tired of all of it. So I got rid of everything. I flushed all those drugs. I got rid of the phone. And then about a month later, this woman walks in who just totally captivates me. And here we are, 12 years later, 6 years married. Me going on 7 years free. But when they kicked me out and sent me to Miami, I was angry. Because I knew without a doubt that this woman was supposed to be my wife. And I felt in that moment like I felt when the judge sentenced me. I felt like when they sent me to that other prison that they had broke us up. I still had 6 years left on my sentence, and in my mind, there's no way this square green woman finna stick around for 6 years and not be able to see me because she's an employee of the DOC. So like we never was able to see each other again until I came home.
Did she
But
get in any trouble for that at all?
she didn't.
Good. Okay.
She didn't. I mean, at the end of the day, there really was nothing to prove other than maybe some fraternizing and, maybe we had talked a little too much, but nothing else, and that was a conscious decision. I didn't want her to get in trouble. I wanted to protect her, because I saw this woman as my wife even back then. So, there was no extracurricular stuff going on. Like, she was she was a woman that you respect, that you take care of, you protect. So other than conversation, there was nothing else for them to do. But like I said, God has other plans in different places. He needs you other than where you want to be sometimes, and I now know without a doubt that being moved to Miami may have been the best thing for us. Because had I stayed at that other prison, we probably would have messed it up. And then not to mention what was going on at Miami. I remember I seen one of my guys that I hadn't seen since Michigan City. And when I caught up with him, I was like, man, what's up, man? He was like, what's going on? He was like, how you doing? I said, man, I'm good. I was like, where you headed? He said, man, I'm headed over to the chapel, man. He was like, man, I gave my life to God, man. Like, I'm a clerk in the chapel. And so I looked at his necklace and I seen he had his Kairos chain on.
Oh yeah.
And so I looked, I said, okay, bro. I said, you been through Kairos? And he was like, oh yeah, life-changing experience. And so I went in my shirt and pulled out my necklace like, bing, I did too. So we started talking about our Kairos experiences. And then he was like, hey man, give me your DOC number. I'm gonna get you on the count letter to come over to the chapel. So boom, I get on the count letter to go to the chapel. And I got over there, man, and, before you knew it, man, I was ministering through music. I was giving exhortations. Pastor was tagging me to get a sermon, like, hey, I need you to get a sermon on such and such date. And God just started doing something with me, man, so much so that I remember a guy was on early child one day headed to the chapel. And this guy came in the child hall and he was like, hey, he said, hey, Jay Fields. He said, man, I've been trying to catch up with you. I said, no, you haven't. He said, man, no, for real. I've really been trying to catch up with you. Like, ask such and such. I said, no, you don't. I'm in the same place every day. I go to work, go back for count. When count clears, I go to the chapel every single day. So if you want to catch up with me, come to the chapel. I'm in the chapel every day. It's not hard to catch up with me. And that's what I would tell people, because that's all I did. You want to see me, come to church. That's where I'm at. And it used to blow people's mind because they knew the old me. So they like, church. Like, so I think some guys thought I just had found a new route and was moving drugs or something through the church. But I'm like, man, God is doing something amazing over here, man. So much so to the point I was coming in from work one day. And please feel free to stop me when you need to, because like when it comes to my period at Miami Correctional Facility, although it was a short period in terms of how long I did at these other facilities, man, it's jam packed with experiences. But
I'm amazed. I'm amazed because everybody I've talked to says Miami's the worst prison in the state of Indiana, and so I'm shocked. I'm just like.
And it is now. But that's a result of what happens when you take God out of the equation. And I'm getting ready to get to that on the tail end of this story. I'm coming in from work one day, and I'm sitting in the sally port waiting on one of the officers to open the door so I can get in on my side of the door. And another guy walks in, and I'm like, ain't nobody up there in the booth. I said, I've been waiting on them to open the doors. And then he said, you don't remember me, do you, Marcus? So I looked up. And I looked up because of him calling me Marcus. Because although I grew up being called Marcus, my family called me Mark, but in prison at that particular time, I was called Blue. I hadn't heard Marcus or none of that in decades. So when I heard Marcus, that told me that that was somebody who knows Marcus, which means this is somebody from Fort Wayne. So I looked him over and I said, nah, I'm drawing a blank. And when he told me his name, it was the guy who had shot my brother.
Oh, wow.
And I was at a loss for words. All I could say was, wow. I probably said wow about 20 times in like a span of a minute. The longest, it seemed like the longest 60 seconds in life, but it probably was only about 60 seconds. And I said wow 20 times in that 60 seconds. And then the officer finally opened the doors, and I looked at him one last time and said, wow. And I walked off, went in my room. They opened my door. And when I walked in, I just sat on my gray box. And we were in 2-man cells there. And my bunkie said, you all right? And I said, man, I just seen the dude who shot my brother. So he jumped up, grabbing his shoes, because I had told him the story so much that he thinking, oh, man, what you done did, man? Like, what's going on? So he started putting on his shoes. I said, nah, man, it's good, man. I said, I passed the test. And he was like, what test? I said, man, you see where I'm at, man. Like, I'm getting ready to go to church soon as count clear, man. I've been in the season, man, like, I've been seeking forgiveness from God, and I've been seeking forgiveness from my victim's family. I said, and God put me in a position to see how I would act when I was the one who needed to forgive. I said, and sometimes we walk around with anger, bitterness that we carry for decades. Because I carried it for decades. This happened in 2016 or 2017. My brother got shot in 1992. I carried that anger with me all those years. That's what, 25 years almost at that point. And I carried anger for a guy that I didn't even recognize. So what am I doing with the anger? Just carrying it because that's what I'm supposed to do? Because I was around the guy that I had the anger for and didn't even know it was. He worked in the same building with me and had been working over there for 2 months. So if he was angry with me and recognized me, he could have done something to me and I wouldn't even seen it coming.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens. We carry anger and don't even know why we carry it. Because a lot of guys that I sit with in prison, especially when I was at work release, that were still angry, I would ask them and they couldn't even articulate to me what they were angry about. They've been carrying it so long, they really forgot why they were angry. They just know they was mad. And that's why this trauma thing is so big with me, because we carry so much unresolved trauma because we don't recognize it as trauma because we haven't been taught trauma or mental health or healthy ways of coping. Those are things we don't talk about in our community. So you got a lot of us that's carrying stuff from childhood, and it is affecting who we are as adults. And we don't even remember why we mad. We don't even remember who we mad at. We just know that we supposed to be mad. So we mad. And we reacting to things in the wrong ways. We're being triggered by stuff and we have no idea we're being triggered. Because you ask people, what did you, I used to, what are you in here for? And people will always tell you their crime. Oh, I got convicted of murder. Or I got convicted of this. Okay. That's what you're here for. Why are you here? It's deeper than the charge. I was charged with murder. I'm anything but a murderer. So you ask me, why am I here? I can't let that define, because there's another reason. And when we tap in and figure that out, then that's when we begin to move into and operate in our purpose.
Yeah, that's amazing. And we talk about it a lot on this show, the providence of God, how God is in complete control of all things. And that's what that reminded me of when you were talking about really everything. And it's just such amazing, man, when a guy that you wanted to kill or at least do serious harm to for 25 years, and then God puts him in your path right when you're trying to ask other people for forgiveness. It's so amazing that God's done similar things in my life, and it's so amazing how He works like that, man. Yeah. It is so amazing. And I know that you're doing a lot of things now that you've been out, Jamarcus. And can you just kind of talk about like everything that you're involved in, maybe for a few minutes, and then could you also share the story about the recent trauma in your life, about you almost died in a work accident?
So I came home, and I said I went to the South Bend Community Reentry Center in 2018. When I got there, I had roughly about 17 months left on my sentence. And I had put in the work. I put in the work, so I thought I was prepared. I had the degrees. I had all these certificates. I had read thousands of books. Like, I put in the work. And then I got there and realized I still wasn't ready because I lacked lived experience. All my lived experience was prison. I didn't even know this world no more. Technology had taken over. And I looked back and I thought, like, with all the work I put in, I'm still behind. What about the guys that didn't even put in half the work? Where will they land? There's only one DOC reentry center in the state of Indiana, and that's in South Bend, and it only houses about 200, and there's almost 30,000 men incarcerated in the state of Indiana. But only 200 beds to prepare long-term guys to come home. What happens to the rest? If only 200 of them can experience this, what kind of experience do the rest of them? They get released out of the back door of Wabash, the back door of Westville, back door of Pendleton, and they give them a card with their reentry money on it, which If you work a prison job, they save 15% of your check, each check, and they put it into this account that builds up until you get ready to come home. I did 26 years and I worked the entire 26 years. And that reentry fund, my 26 years was worth almost $400
Wow.
after 26 years. Like my 26 years netted me less than 1 week's pay working my job at the work. So I wanted to create a program, an opportunity to be able to provide these men with everything that I wish I, from resources to support to mentors, programming, training. I wanted to offer them everything that I wish I had to prepare me to come back into society after 26 years. That's what made me start Iron Sharpens Iron. I started Iron Sharpens Iron. I got the work going, and we already know every time you start something good, like the enemy is paying attention, and he is always going to rear his ugly head. It's not a reason to flee. That is a reason to put your armor on, get in your prayer closet, because it's coming. And when I got released, I lived my first year in South Bend before moving to Indianapolis and then getting married. And when I moved here, I got a job, what I thought was the perfect job. It was walking distance. If the car went crazy and didn't want to start, I could walk to work. It was that close. Good pay, along my skill set. It was along the lines of the same work that I was doing in South Bend before I moved here. Got in there and I'm working, and I'm moving up the ladder quick because I'm a hard worker. I come from working in the prison for pennies. Now you come out here and tell me you gonna pay me 20 anything an hour, like the level of work you finna get out of me.
Yeah.
So I'm working. They had this big project with Amazon that they needed to complete and had a deadline to get all this product made, boxed, and ready to ship. So I was on second shift. They asked me if I would come in and work third with one of the supervisors to help get this order done. So I'm like, yeah, cool, I got it. You know what I mean? And they're giving me double time. So I'm in there getting that money. And I'm on the machine one night and the machine starts malfunctioning. The parts keep getting stuck. Now I'm working at a place where we make plastic products, like hard plastic products. So we're heating and melting this plastic to sit on this mold and form itself and then cool off. And then it hardens up. And then I'm the CNC machinist. I program the machine to cut the specs. And then I take them off, inspect them, tag them, and I box them. So this particular night, the parts keep getting stuck in the machine. After it comes off the cooling session, it's supposed to come into this belt. Then the arms open up, the part drops, slides down to me. I put it on the CNC machine and cut it. Keeps getting stuck. So when I went through my training, I seen parts get stuck while in my training. And my trainer would just grab the corner of it and just pop it down. It falls and comes on out. So it did that like about 2 or 3 times throughout the night. And that's what I did. I would just step up there, knock it down, keep it going. So I'm tagging and inspecting one part. I turn around. This is the 4th part that then got stuck. So I went over there and I lift up on the thing to knock it down in the corner. In hindsight, the problem with that was I wasn't conscious of how long it's been sitting there. So as soon as I reach up to grab it and pull it down, the clamps close. And it closes my hand up against the plastic part. And when I tell you that clamp closing, they said those things close at like 1,000 pounds of pressure. So when that clamp closed, it broke my finger. Like I felt it snap the bone. And then it started rotating. So it's dragging me. I can't even get my arm out. And I had to step up there to even get it. So like it's spinning and it's dragging me and my feet are no longer on the ground. This arm is headed towards the oven. Because whether there's a part in there or not, it rotates on a timer unless somebody stops it. So I'm glad I didn't have a panic button because I told myself I'm going to have to yank my hand out of it. And I know there's going to be some damage. I just don't know to what extent. But it's either get my hand out of this clamp or go in that oven at 700 something degrees Fahrenheit. I'm about to be cremated if I don't get out of here. Said a quick prayer, and with every ounce of strength I had in me, I just yanked my arm. And when I yanked it, I left the whole tip of my finger in there. I scratched my arm up, scratched the rest of my hand up. I thought part of my thumb was left in there, but it took the whole tip of my finger. Now, remember, I told you, it broke my finger when the clamp closed. So when I yanked, I had to snatch the skin because the bone had already snapped. And I landed on the ground, and I just started laughing. Because there's nobody in this warehouse except me and this other supervisor. Nobody else saw this. Nobody was coming for help. And I'm stuck in the clamp. I can't even get to the emergency stop button. So I said, man, nobody's going to believe this. I went and found the supervisor. He panicked, threw up at the sight of it. So I'm like, he wouldn't have been no help if he could have got down. Took me to the hospital, and they did amputation surgery. Couldn't repair it and put the tip back on because it was stuck in the clamp, and it did go into the oven and got cooked and obliterated. So I couldn't even save it and stitch it back on if I wanted to.
Wow. So the tip of your finger went in the oven. So you knew for a fact it was going to drag you in there.
Yeah.
Man.
And that was my first, there's irony all throughout this story because now with Iron Sharpens Iron, we have such a heightened awareness on mental health among the youth and among justice impacted individuals. But that was my first real introduction to trauma. Although I've been living with trauma my whole life, again, those aren't things that we talk about in our community. So this was my first real introduction with trauma. I went through workers' comp, and as part of my workers' comp, I started seeing a therapist. Just for this, I was already seeing a therapist about prison and returning back to society, but workers' comp paid for a therapist for the injury. So I took the opportunity. I went and saw the therapist. So as my workers' comp was coming to an end, he asked me what was my plans for employment. So I said, well, the path of least resistance is to just go back to the same place where the accident happened. He was like, you sure about that? I was like, yeah, I'm good physically. Like, tip of a finger. Like, I've learned how to deal with less in life. So like I'll be okay. He wasn't talking physical. He was talking about mentally. Was I sure about that? So he said, well, do me a favor. He said, why don't you just go back up there one day and just go back to the site where it happened and see how you feel. So I'm like, all right. Man, I got back up there, man. I couldn't even make it back there where the machine was, man. It was like I had a panic attack going through the door. I got real hot and sweaty, like I was about to pass out. And that happened to me twice. So I went back, got in the car, and I called the therapist and I told him what happened. And he was like, I figured as much. He was like, that's why I wanted you to go back up there. He said, so the environment is triggering you now. Every time you go back up there. And like, I thought I was cool until that moment. And that's why I'm like, man, there are so many of us that are walking around, and it was a term that my mom used in that interview. They're learning how to function in dysfunction.
Yeah.
We're carrying this trauma and not really knowing what it is, but we've carried it for so long that the reactions and the impact of it has become normal to us. So we don't think there's nothing wrong with us because this is how we're used to feeling. This is how we're used to responding. That has become our norm. So if this is normal to me, there can't be anything wrong with it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And because we don't know, it just becomes normal. So like I said, I thought I was cool till I went up there and then that happened. And I realized that I wasn't. And a lot of times that's exactly how people are handling and carrying trauma, and they actually think they're.
So, Jamarcus, when we talked, you had mentioned that there is an Iron Sharpens Iron in every county in Indiana.
Almost. Of the 92, we've serviced 87 of them. Now, when I say 87, it doesn't mean that there's an Iron Sharpens Iron branch and headquarters in all 87 counties. What it means is that Iron Sharpens Iron has touched us, done seminars, mentored someone in 87 of the 92 counties, which isn't hard for us because all of our programming started in DOC. DOC is just a big melting pot of the whole state of Indiana. So like every prison, like if you take everybody's zip code, they're from all over. So when we, do our forums, we have people like, even when I get calls and emails and submissions through the website, they from all over the place. Because we've impacted, we've given cars, we've sent information to all these different places. So there's no telling where our calls are coming from when they come to service people. So I had to set up a northern branch, a northern region, a central region, and a southern region, and break the state up into thirds. So there's a northern team, a central team, and then a southern.
Absolutely. And so, Jamarcus, I want to thank you for being on the show today, man. We covered a lot of different topics, and I just want to thank you so much for being on Walk the Way, Talk the Way. Yes. And again, I'd love to do this again sometime if you're able to. So,
absolutely, I look forward to it.
All right, well, thanks again. For everybody that's watching, I hope you guys watch this whole video with Jamarcus Fields on Walk the Way, Talk the Way, and sit down and really enjoy this video and share it with somebody who needs to hear a good story about redemption